Hello and welcome to our Caresfield CaresTalk video on gloves. Thank you so much for joining us today. For years, Caresfield has been a trusted supplier of labels, patient ID bands, and specimen collection products. Did you know that we also offer a full line of nitrile, vinyl, and latex exam gloves? These are a great option for hospitals, long-term care, reference lab, and other healthcare facilities. For clinicians, this video will give you a look into all the work that goes into keeping your team safe. For our friends in the supply chain, you'll learn how to get a reliable supply of exam gloves without breaking your budget. Ready to get your hands dirty? Let's go. During the pandemic, gloves, like a lot of important PPE, became scarce. Domestic shortages were exacerbated by inferior product being imported from other countries. It got so bad, the FDA investigated over 100 companies from around the world for importing inferior gloves. If you experienced shortages or substandard quality during or after the pandemic, consider switching to Caresfield. During this video, you'll hear from our gloves team to learn how and why Caresfield started distributing gloves to help meet the needs of our customers. Then we'll welcome in a friend of ours from CoShield, one of our primary manufacturers of gloves, to discuss how they secure a steady supply of raw materials and maintain a reliable supply chain. Lastly, you'll hear from our Director of Supply Chain and Operations to learn how you can obtain samples and secure a reliable supply of exam gloves. If you'd like to chat with a Caresfield rep about your gloves needs, simply email sales@caresfield.com, that's sales@caresfield.com, or use the live chat feature on our website to talk to a real person. For years, Caresfield has been a trusted provider of labels, patient ID bands, and specimen collection products. Now that you know that we offer a full line of medical exam and surgical gloves, let me introduce our gloves team. We'll discuss how Caresfield got into distributing medical gloves and why you can rely on us for a reliable supply of quality products. First, let me welcome Steve Griffith, Caresfield's Chief Operating Officer and one of our owners. Steve has been with Caresfield for more than 20 years and is a big part of why we have such a sterling reputation for outstanding customer service. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. Tom, I'm very privileged to be here and look forward to going over this subject with you.
Next up, we have Reed Griffith. Reed has been with Caresfield for about 2.5 years and has helped a number of hospitals and health systems find significant cost savings, both during and after the pandemic. Reed, thanks for being part of our discussion today.
Thank you, Tom. Excited to be here.
And finally, we have Brad Smith. Brad is relatively new to Caresfield, but he's been working in the industry and he has a lot of experience, especially around gloves and surgical products. Brad, thanks for being a part of our discussion.
Thanks, Tom. Happy to be here.
Steve, we'll start with you. Can you tell us about Caresfield's history with gloves?
That's a great question, Tom. It goes back to about 2010 when we decided to add nitrile gloves to our offerings to the laboratories. The reason we added them is because we have sold to laboratory managers and phlebotomy supervisors for many years, and they'd often ask us, what else can you provide us? So we added the nitrile gloves about 12, 13 years ago to our line, and what we found is that there was a need in the marketplace for a high quality but thin, stretchy nitrile gloves. So that's what we were able to formulate and provide for our customers. And the reason they need them thinner and as well as high quality is because they need to be able to put them on without tearing, but then also be able to feel the veins of the patient when they're getting ready to draw their blood. So over the years, we've been able to build great relationships with some of the best factories in the world manufacturing these gloves, and have been able to keep our customers very happy with a high quality product.
Well, that's great, but how did all of that change during the pandemic?
Well, everything changed during the pandemic. Very quickly, there became a major shortage of nitrile gloves. I believe it was just A lot of it was panic buying, but then no one knew what was ahead and how serious this COVID was going to be. So everyone wanted to stock up. And then there was also, I believe, states mandated healthcare facilities to have a certain amount of gloves in their stockpiles. So what this did is wiped out all the available gloves pretty much worldwide. And then the factories became inundated with orders. A lot of good relationships that people had had for years with factories kind of started to deteriorate because they were selling to someone else that would pay them a lot more money, and the prices started escalating. And then there was also a lot of bad actors out there at the time that were trying to sell bad quality and not proper nitrile healthcare approved gloves. So during all this, we were able to help our hospitals because we had very strong relationships with the factories. One in particular is called CoShield, and they delivered every time they said, with a high quality FDA approved product, and our customers loved it, and we loved working with them. And what we were able to do is help out our customers from running out of gloves. We actually had calls from some of our clients where they were in tears because they were on their last box of gloves, and that's in a pandemic. That's a serious situation to be in, and it felt rewarding for us to be able to provide nitrile gloves for them to keep their hospitals going and care for the people that were hit by this pandemic. So we're happy to be able to keep the nurses safe and the technicians safe, and the as they helped out the patients, because the nurses and the hospital workers were really on the front line throughout this whole pandemic.
And Brad, you weren't with Caresfield at this time, but you were working in the industry. What were your observations during this pandemic?
Yeah, Tom, that's correct. I was with another company, and very similar to what experience that Steve's talking about. We ran across things very similar. There was price gouging going within the market, and I think a lot of that was just because of the supply-demand chain. Also, they were getting supply from China. We, as my previous company, we couldn't provide gloves either, but we would overpromise and we underdelivered a lot of times, and it's really just because of the supply chain crunch, getting supply from China, didn't know when the timing was coming for the gloves or if we'd even get the full order and then out to the customers. So a lot of similar things that Steve was talking about. We ran across those issues as well.
Sure. Well, Reed, you've worked on gloves since you started with Caresfield. What is the current state of the gloves market?
That's a great question, Tom. I think, as Steve mentioned earlier, during the pandemic, there was a lot of that panic buying due to the shortages, and many organizations were getting partially filled orders. Most of those types of situations are gone now. For the most part, the supply chain for gloves has really filled back in. So that has led to most healthcare organizations turning their attention more from sourcing and product need to cost savings initiatives. And all of that said, some of them are still, we are hearing some need for some of the more specialty gloves, like extra small or extended cuff or surgical. But in the main, I think it's fair to say that the supply chain has mostly filled back in.
Sure. And then, Steve, your thoughts on the current gloves market?
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, as Brad and Reed have referred to. The pricing kept escalating, and it eventually hit a peak, and now the prices have started to come down. But what we decided to do is to try and be literally the first ones out there with a lower price than what a lot of our large competitors are charging. So there's some customers we've found that are still paying, very high prices, pandemic pricing, but we're offering them much more competitive pricing, back to pricing that we'd have seen prior to the pandemic, and we feel that's fair for the customer to pay a fair price, not be still paying pandemic pricing.
Sure, I'm sure a lot of those deals that were signed during the pandemic look good at the time, but it's time to revisit them now. Brad, can you share an anecdote about a time when you've helped a customer with their gloves?
Sure. And this is, yeah, absolutely, Tom. With a regional hospital we have in Alabama, we showed the quality during the pandemic, but also kept the relationship building and open communication that allowed for the relationship to continue to build. And during that time, we were able to develop a fair partnership with them, and they understood that we had their well-being, and we wanted to make sure we provided quality gloves, but also, like Steve was mentioning, that we were first to come to them with some better pricing to help understand that we do want to be good stewards of the business, but also be the forefront of helping out the customers.
Sure. Steve, earlier you mentioned the partnership with CoShield. Can you tell us more about this relationship and where you see it evolving in the future?
That's a great question, Tom. During COVID, a lot of promises were being made by a lot of manufacturers, and unfortunately, 99% of them weren't coming true to their promises to the people that were purchasing the gloves. They were either not showing up at all, or showing up late, or changing the price or the quality. But one manufacturer that we aligned with is CoShield, and it's been an amazing partnership. They have literally every single promise they've made, they've followed through with us on. They delivered on time, high quality, great gloves, never had a complaint. And it's grown into more of a partnership now, where we've been asked by them to be the master distributor in the United States. So it's quite exciting for us that they've chosen Caresfield to be the exclusive master distributor of their product. Another really good thing that they offer is insight into the quality control. They have a rigorous quality control standard, and it's been excellent to work with a company that is forward thinking like CoShield, and they're also always looking for ways to solve customers' problems and questions and concerns.
And Reed, I think that quality process has been a talking point for you with one of your customers. Can you share an experience where the quality of the CoShield gloves came up?
Yeah. I was just gonna jump in on that point, Tom. One that comes to mind is a large health system with locations in multiple regions in the country. They, we were working with them on the gloves, and then, the question came up about, quality control processes, manufacturing processes, the testing, how that's all completed. And what we did was we went to CoShield and had they put together a lot of that information in a presentation, and then we met with the client and went through all of that information, with their top quality control employees at the health system, and it really went well. They let us know after the meeting that they were very impressed with the CoShield quality control and just all of the processes they have in place to, ensure that the quality of their gloves is second to none. And so yeah, it's been a great partnership for us.
Well, that's great. Brad, I'll turn to you. What has Caresfield done to ensure that we have a reliable supply of medical gloves?
That's a great question, Tom, and it builds on what Reed and Steve were talking about with our partnership with CoShield. And it goes a little further than that too, in making sure we have our partnership with our customer as well. But CoShield has been able to ease our customers with the way they go about manufacturing their gloves. Whether it's the production lines, they ensure the product of the gloves from raw materials to completion, our customers can get an insight of what they're doing with that type of manufacturing. So that's really good to see, and that transparency is really nice. Caresfield has safety stock for customers that want to invest within Caresfield. So we'll have those gloves on hand with them. So it's something we would like to guarantee on a stock for up to 6 months worth for all customers that are willing to purchase through Caresfield. And not only do we have surgical gloves, but we have many different types of surgical gloves, whether it's vinyl, nitrile, polyisoprene, extended cuff, extra smalls. I mean, we have every type of glove that you can think of, and we can be your one-stop shop for the medical gloves.
Oh, that's great. Reed, when clinicians and hospitals and health systems are evaluating the quality of gloves for purchase, what should they keep an eye on?
That's a good question, Tom. And I think that there's really four main points that would be considered in the evaluation. The first one, it always comes down to the quality of the glove. You know, it's got to be strong and durable, but also still thin and stretchy, so that you maintain that tactile sensitivity. This is especially important with phlebotomists that need to be able to feel that vein when they're doing blood draws. So it's really finding that perfect balance of having the strength when you're pulling it on, but still thin enough to be comfortable and feel the veins, as I said. And really brings to mind one customer I was working with. They converted over to our gloves, and afterwards I asked about the quality and the feedback they got from their staff on it, and they let me know that a lot of the feedback had to do with when they were putting the gloves on. The former manufacturer they were using, those gloves would tear at the wrist when they were pulling them on. Ours solved that problem, which obviously helped them reduce costs as well. So that was great to hear. And then moving on to the second point, it's really reliability. This is especially important after everything that happened during the pandemic. You know, gloves are such a valuable supply in a hospital. They gotta have them. So really, it's important to look for a vendor that can guarantee supply and have that large safety stock on hand for if something was to happen. And then transparency, you know, a lot rides on the factory of the gloves or the manufacturer, and where are the gloves coming from? What is the testing and quality control, like I mentioned earlier? So that's one of our points of emphasis now, is to be transparent right down to the factory of where our gloves are manufactured. And then lastly is just value, which is really the whole package, right? It's not just competitive pricing. It's not just the good quality gloves, but it's the full package with customer service, pricing, quality, reliability, etc. So.
Sure. Brad, where can different types of health facilities typically find cost savings with gloves?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's one we get quite a bit. Really, just through a qualitative analysis, we're just looking at glove quality. Are you double gloving? Are they breaking easily? You may be getting 2,000 gloves per case, but you may be going through them a lot quicker than what you are with 1,000 glove case, and that really just boils down to the quality, making sure that you have that ability to test them, and we're willing to send the samples out for that type of testing. Also, what kind of gloves are you getting? Are you getting non-chemo rated or chemo rated? Here at Caresfield, we have chemo rated gloves that can do away with the non-chemo, but still have the competitive rates. And then you should see that on your bottom line when you go through the number of gloves you're using versus just the cost that you're paying. And just having that qualitative analysis will help see that savings in the bottom line.
Sure. And Steve, anything that you want to add as a closing thought on where health facilities can typically find cost savings?
I think just to echo what Brad said, that currently we see a lot of hospitals purchasing two gloves, one for that is chemo rated and one that's not chemo rated. And what we're doing is providing a high quality chemo rated glove at a great price. We've been saving our customers a lot of money, and it's kind of a one-stop shop glove where it'll fit all their needs, and that way they don't have to order two different gloves and have two different gloves distributed through the hospital, which also adds expense. So they can save money by coming to Caresfield and buying one glove that's chemo rated and will work for all their team.
Oh, that's great. Steve, Reed, Brad, thank you guys all so much for joining us for this discussion today. Now I'm excited to welcome in Josiah Curry, Client Project Lead at CoShield. Caresfield is pleased to be CoShield's master distributor of gloves here in the US. Josiah is coming to us all the way from New Zealand. Josiah, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Tom. My privilege.
Can you tell us a bit about CoShield and how you got into manufacturing gloves?
Thanks for the question, Tom. So CoShield, we're a global supply chain and procurement specialist. We work with governments, distributors and large corporates, large organisations on critical health and humanitarian products. But about where we bring value is obviously through our economies of scale. We're a global enterprise and we do a lot through US, through Caresfield, very valued partner of ours. There's obviously economies of scale, and then compliance. We're very strong with compliance. With gloves, we've been in the industry for about 4 years now, but our history is really on supply chain and logistics, very strong on that front. We've had relationships with glove manufacturers in many countries now for 4 years. So
I'm sure you planned one thing with gloves 4 years ago. Then the pandemic happened. How did your thinking and planning change regarding gloves because of the pandemic?
yeah, great question. The pandemic really highlighted how important gloves, and particularly PPE, has been to the healthcare industry. Healthcare workers it's highlighted how critical those products are to that industry. And they've done a very great job, and we've been privileged to be part of that supply chain. In terms of managing that supply chain, it's certainly been a challenge, but thankfully through our economies of scale and our, I guess, vast network of connections and knowledge of the logistics markets, we've held pretty strong. We haven't relied on one manufacturer or one source of origin in our gloves, so that's been pretty critical for us to offer reliable and good product to our customers. So we've stood pretty strong through the pandemic, and we've seen a lot of changes with pricing and supply, but we haven't had any issues with getting supply. Pricing has changed a lot. We've seen that sort of reflective of raw materials and freight costing, but thankfully we're seeing it plateau a lot now and stabilise. So that's a few comments, Tom.
Sure. Well, speaking of raw supplies, how do you ensure that you have a steady supply of raw materials for your manufacturing?
Yeah, very good question, Tom. I think it's critical that we hold a strong relationship with our manufacturers. It's an area that we strongly focus on. We have fortnightly meetings with all our manufacturers, and part of that is having the full visibility of their raw material process. We also audit them as well. We have staff that go into their factories and audit them. We do a full review of their raw material, stock levels and inventory. So that's very critical, having a full visibility of their supply chain. We're conscious there can be challenges, so it's more about being aware of that and managing that. As I said before, we're not reliant on any one manufacturer, so we do balance things like that. If there's issues with one manufacturer having a shortage over a period, we would swap to another manufacturer. But for the case of Caresfield, we do use one main manufacturer in Malaysia, and they've given us very good supply through the pandemic. Been very strong around raw materials, so we've got a very good relationship there. The team are across there last month, about 6 weeks ago. They're across there, did a full factory tour, and they're very, very well stocked to help Caresfield.
Well, that's great. Does CoShield or do any of CoShield's manufacturers use child labor to manufacture gloves?
That's a very good question, Tom, and it's very topical in the industry. child labour is absolute no-no for CoShield. It's fundamental for us that we do a very thorough review of every manufacturer that we take on, or any supplier. So we go through a very deep process when we engage a new manufacturer. One of those processes we do is a third-party audit, typically run by CDEX. CDEX run a social compliance audit on our manufacturers. So that's what we've done with most of our with all our manufacturers, is run report either through CDEX. SGS is another one we've used to ensure there's absolutely no child labour or unethical practices.
That's great. Once the gloves are made, what has CoShield done to ensure a reliable supply chain for medical gloves?
I just once it's made, I mean, products made per order, and then it's managing the logistics side. So we're very strong freight forwarders in global logistics. With every order, we do bring to the table options on how we manage our logistics, whether it's through sea freight or air freight, whether it's fast delivery or slow delivery. So there's quite a few options in that space. We've been in logistics for over 15 years, not specifically in the gloves, but in the whole logistics field for about 15 years. And we've got a lot of strong international partners in that space. So we certainly feel we're got the buying power and connections to be a reliable supplier.
Sure. Well, just one more question for you. What processes are in place to make sure that your gloves are always high quality? How do you maintain the quality of your medical gloves?
That is a great question, and it's very, very critical. So obviously the gloves have a certain level of standard. So they've got the ASTM standard and FDA standard, which would be typical in US. So that's saying up front that this is what the product meets to be a medical grade glove. But beyond that, how do you maintain that is sort of the key question. So the way we do that comes back to full visibility of the quality control processes with our manufacturers. Every order, we get a third-party test done on the product. So it's randomly tested on, so they take a container of gloves, for example, they'll do a random testing of a handful of gloves in that batch, and it's typically done by SGS or another independent party, and they will test the performance criteria of the glove to ensure it meets the medical standards. So that's how we make sure that every product that we're delivering is meeting that standard consistently.
Well, that's great. Josiah, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries, Tom. My privilege, and we seriously appreciate the effort of the team at Caresfield and the work they're doing for us in the US market. Very thankful for our partnership.
As are we. Next up, we'll talk more about the steps that Caresfield is taking to help ensure a reliable supply of quality medical gloves. And joining us now is Caresfield Director of Supply Chain and Operations, Wade Blum. Wade, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Wade, you're a supply chain expert with years of experience in different industries. What global factors should health systems consider when evaluating gloves?
Well, there's really a couple. So gloves are very rarely made in the United States, so that means you have to import them. Most imports of gloves come in through Asia, so there's a high probability that you're coming in through your West Coast ports. So the biggest thing right now with your West Coast ports is your lead times. So there's a large backlog of ships sitting off of Tacoma and sitting off of LA Long Beach. And then the other thing is, because a lot of gloves come out of China, there's issues with the ports in Shanghai and Ningbo. And so those are both backed up. So it really depends where you're bringing them into, but your lead time is your largest factor. And then the other one is just capacity at the plants. And then there have been a little bit of restrictions with raw materials, but we're starting to see that ease.
Sure. Well, where are Caresfield's gloves stored, and what does that mean for health systems?
So with Caresfield, we have a unique partnership with CoShield, and as a result, we store all the gloves here in the United States. They're actually all stored here in Lakeville, Minnesota. We have 2 warehouses completely full of gloves, and then we have 1 warehouse that we use for inbound, outbound shipments to customers.
Wade, we often use the term reserved inventory. Can you tell us what that means for our customers?
Yeah, so it's a pre-purchase or a pre-buy, right? So if a customer wants to say, hey, I want to buy 700 cases of gloves, but I only need 200 of them now, that's fine, that's not a problem. We'll take the order for 700 cases of gloves and then ship them whenever the customer needs them.
That's great. And then for shipping, what are Caresfield's shipping times like?
So for any in-stock item, which obviously all the gloves are in stock right now, it's 2 days typically to anywhere in the Midwest, and it can be 4 to 5 days depending where it's going, but that's going to be usually Alaska or some of the outer reaches in the United States where FedEx or UPS struggle to deliver.
Well, Wade, if somebody wants to get started, how can they get their hands on some sample product of Caresfield gloves?
You can simply go to our website, caresfield.com. Under the Support tab, there's a Request a Sample button, and we'll send you out a little sample.
Well, that's great. Wade, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for watching this CaresTalk video on gloves. I hope we've shown you how Caresfield provides a reliable supply of exam and surgical gloves. This important PPE keeps your team safe so they can deliver exceptional care. If you'd like to request a sample, visit info.caresfield.com/gloves and tell us a bit more about your gloves needs. You can also reach out via email at sales@caresfield.com, that's sales@caresfield.com, or use the live chat feature on our website, www.caresfield.com, to talk to a real person today. Thank you so much for watching. Let's talk.